Dr. Scott Blumenthal. To my immediate right is Dr. Jack Ziegler, and far right, Dr. Rick Geyer. We're the co-founders of the Center for Disc Replacement at Texas Back Institute, and we have been doing this now closing on 20 years. So you might say that you're looking at 60 years of lumbar disc replacement experience in front of the camera right now. We've got a patient registry of over 3,000 patients, and it's become a very not only exciting, evolutionary, and revolutionary field, and that's what we're here to talk about. And I think I'd like to throw it out now because we're seeing more acceptance of disc replacement by the payer community is what's changed in the last year since we met a year ago at NASS 2018. We'll start with Jack and we'll go around.
Well, gratifyingly, there's been a bigger acceptance from the insurance community in considering patients for disc replacement instead of fusion. At the same time, there's been an increasing groundswell among patients. Patients become more and more self-educated. They start looking on the internet and checking out results of disc replacement in patients who have had disc replacements versus fusions. So our patients come to us with questions about disc replacement. They come to us with a lot of information and sometimes ask us for very detailed information about the implants that we're planning to use. So we've always been happy to have that interplay with patients, and now more patients can get disc replacement through their insurance.
Yeah, what we've seen is now there's about a 65% coverage rate by the insurance companies for the lumbar artificial disc. And it's been a hard play because, as you said, we've been doing these for 20 years. We know the results. We know how to select the proper patients. And the results are very, very gratifying. And it's nice to see patients come in, as Jack said, they come in educated where they've been told they needed a fusion. And fortunately, they had done the research and say, well, maybe there's something different. Just like today in 2019, you would never go into a surgeon for a bad hip or a bad knee and walk out and say, I want a fusion. You want a disc or you want a joint replacement, just like in the lumbar spine. The disc replacement is a great option for the patient.
Why do you think that lumbar disc replacement has stayed kind of a center of excellence type procedure as opposed to cervical, which is done pretty much in every community? Lumbar is still not as well. There are parts of the country you just can't get lumbar, and obviously we've seen that in our practice because they come down and get consults from us.
You know, Scott, I think it goes back to, way back when there was a lot of low back pain for work and for patients that were injured on the job, and it got its bad name that, oh, you can't treat back patients, you can't help them, you can't make them better. But if you follow the criteria, as we have with the different FDA studies that we were involved with, patients do very well. And the three of us know that patients are so grateful. They come back, they say, Doctor, you changed my life. I mean, I couldn't do this for 10 years. And we're not talking about patients that hurt their back and have 6 months of back pain, even though that was the FDA criteria. We're talking about patients who are functionally disabled, who have given up lots of things in life, and their quality of life just stinks. So if you choose your patients correctly, they can do really well. But the other thing that has been working against us is, number one, the reimbursement has been far less than doing a fusion. So it's very easy for a surgeon to say, well, you need a fusion instead of a disc replacement. And a lot of folks still have not educated themselves about the data.
A lot of it also comes down to the technical expertise. To be a good disc surgeon, you have to be very comfortable working on the front part of the spine. So there are areas in the country where anterior lumbar spine surgery is not done a lot. And this disc replacement should not be done by the occasional surgeon. It really is demanding both intellectually and technically. And I think it's done better by people who do a lot of them. We know the complication rate is less as you do more and more. So centers of excellence where surgeons have dedicated their practice to working on the front of the spine, do it routinely, have a team around them, and do it well, will always have better outcomes than a surgeon who does these just once or twice a year.
And that's what we strive to do. I mean, we've had access surgeons that we've worked with for well over 20 years that have an experience of over 7,000 cases each, and that makes the surgery safe for our patients and allows us to do our job safely and effectively and to do it the best we can.
Specifically, we've seen some things in the last year regarding coverage and changing coverage and things like that. I asked Jack to talk first about advocacy, how the legal community helped and industry helped move the needle, and then I'll ask Rick about how some of the data that we've collected helped tweak the needle a little bit. You were involved in some of the the class action issues.
Yeah, we've struggled as surgeons trying to help individual patients get approval from their insurance company for disc replacement, and it's very time consuming. It goes through lots of delays and frankly has not been very rewarding. The occasional patient can squeak through, but if the medical policy said that it was not covered as a benefit, it was very hard to get it done. But in the last 2 years, 2 class action lawsuits where large groups of patients were able to successfully press a lawsuit against their insurance company, showing the weight of evidence that shows that disc replacement is a very reasonable alternative to fusion, have led to medical policy changes from 2 of the large insurance carriers in the country. And we're hoping that that wave will continue with the remaining insurance companies who still say it's investigational, which is ludicrous. Since we've been doing it for 20 years, it's been FDA approved for more than 15 years.
Rick, tell us how we were able to move the needle. Once United did start covering it, they added some criteria that were not part of the FDA trial, and we were able to answer that with data. Talk about that.
Well, the importance of data is always, what the insurance companies want to see, and that's how they finally stopped saying this was experimental. So, for example, United Healthcare tried to insert various criteria that the FDA trials didn't include. For example, a year of conservative treatment, and it was 6 months, and some other items as well. The data that we've collected now with our registry, which is really incredible, we're starting to see our patients back from 15, 16 years. And the incredible thing is that we're not seeing wear, we're not seeing revisions. In fact, our first 1,700 that we reviewed, we only have a 1% revision rate. So we're not seeing these disasters that people predicted 20 years ago. Oh my God, you're going to kill people. We've not seen that, fortunately. And the power is in the data. And as we get more and more data in our registry, we'll be able to come out with even more powerful statements.
Yeah, and the other thing, again, a paper that's going to be presented at this meeting was when United Healthcare finally did cover it, they excluded patients with previous discectomies, which were in fact part of the study. We were able, the 3 of us, with the help of one of our industry partners, to gather the data from a level 1 study and show United that not only did they not do worse, they did better. And we didn't wait a whole year for them to review their policy. They changed it within a couple of months, and I'd never seen that type of tweaking of a policy change that readily. So again, data really helps when if they're willing to listen, is what it comes down
Right,
to.
and in particular for that group of patients, the patient with recurrent disc herniations, multiple recurrent disc herniations, they do wonderful. We know that with the disc replacement, in contrast to doing a fusion, which is so much more expensive because of all the different fusion cages you can use, the fusion products, the biologic, the screws, the cages, whatever. And these patients are among our best patients, and I think we all agree with that.
We still hope there's a big untapped potential of patients who are being offered only a fusion or being covered only for fusion, who will, in the next 2 or 3 years, be able to get disc replacements instead.
That's a great segue, because I want to talk just for a few minutes about medical tourism. There are sites outside the US that if you want an artificial disc, you will get an artificial disc. Whereas we looked at our data, and about 50% of patients that come to us for an artificial disc have a contraindication, so it's about 50-50. We're seeing a lot of complications from outside US where they're just doing what the patients want, which we've shown is kind of wrong in about 50% of the time. And we're starting to see them come back to the US, and unfortunately they look for disc replacement centers like ours to come to. Talk a little bit about screening of patients and how the standard in the US is much different than outside the US with out-of-town patients.
Well, we have a program which we, as you well know, where we screen patients who send their information in, and they are the medical tourism patients. And we are very careful in that the 3 of us will actually review the data rather than a nurse, rather than indicating everybody for disc replacement, as we've seen many of these patients that are shopping for the right surgeon. Unfortunately, we don't have all the disc replacement available, but what we do have, we have aftercare that we can provide our patients. So every patient we operate on that we deem is an acceptable candidate, in other words, they're not osteoporotic, they haven't had their facets chopped away from previous surgery, and they don't have any of the other contraindications, we take care of those patients forever. Whereas if you go to Europe, they come to us with their complications, and the doctor that did the surgery is there, well, okay.
In Europe, it's pretty standard that like Rick said, they'll be reviewed by a nurse, they'll meet the doctor and have their surgery
On the same day.
on the same visit.
Yeah.
We don't do that. We require a physical face-to-face consult because there is that doctor-to-patient interaction and looking someone in the eye, and sometimes you know they're just not a good candidate. We also do psychological screening, which they don't do.
And that's a difference, Scott, is that we require the patient at least to come in to meet us so that, number one, the x-ray studies meet what the patient is telling us, and also if we have any red flags. Or, for example, that one patient you had that had a nickel allergy where, can't do a disc replacement on that patient.
Yeah. Well, our time's up. Thank you, guys. I think this was really interesting, and perhaps we can be back next year.